So how do you respond to people when they challenge you that the Bible is unreliable? It's full of errors, it was written a long time ago, where you don't have the original documents. That's all true, actually. Today I've got some hints and tips for you and a really, really good pushback on one of them. Check it out right here, right now. Hi, welcome to the channel. My name is Dan Beasley and this channel is all about inspiring intentional discipleship, helping you go deeper in your faith and living it out in the world today. And one of the things with living our faith out in the world today is to respond to people's questions. And one of the questions and challenges that we do on many levels is the reliability of the Bible. They love to challenge us. It's about what maybe they read or what they think. So the first thing I always say on these is when people ask you questions, push back on them. If they say that the Bible's unreliable, they say that the Bible is written by authors and they're gone and we've got no original manuscripts, and say thanks, that's really interesting. Where did you get that from? I'd love to learn. One, actually for you to learn, they might have some information that you don't know. Never write off people. Some people might have researched this really well. It will only help you, so they might give you a resource that you never knew before. But also it puts the question back to them. They're on the attack for you. They want to disprove to you that your faith is wrong, not to become a Christian themselves. So it's a case of pushing back. And what's the premise of your argument? Where did you get that information? Why do you think that? How did you come to that conclusion? It puts the question back to them. And also, like I said, it's not to be, in a sense, horrible. It's to take the pressure off you, but also that you might be able to learn something off them. But how do you respond to people? I think really what we need to do as well is just be truthful about it. So with the positives and the negatives. So let's look at some positives with some negatives in there as well. So let's look at this slide. In here, you can see the number of copies that we have of the New Testament compared to some of the well-known writings from the ancient world. So you can see Celis's Gaelic walls, which I learnt at university as part of my archaeological degree. You got Tacitus, you got Aristotle, you got Homer writing the Iliad. If we take Caesar's Gaelic Wars, because like I said, that was something that was important to me and taught at university level, written between 100 and 44 BC. Earliest copy is 900 AD. That's about 900 to 1,000 years, and they've only got 10 copies. And that's fine, because they can use that at university on a degree. And the New Testament, written sometime starting the 40s to 100 AD. The earliest copy is a fragment, and then we go on to get a lot more after that. Time span, more than 25 years, of course, because that fragment isn't from the last book of Revelation written. So you could say it's a lot more than that, 25 to 125 years, say, and counting. But look at the amount of copies. The Caesar's Gaelic Wars is 10 copies. The New Testament has over 24,000, 5,300 ancient Greek, and that varies in itself as well. Some stating more. 10,000 Latin Vulgate, and over 9,300 other, and we'll come on to those in a second. So the sheer amount of copies that we got means that any time people can say, well, that it's unreliable, actually, because of those copies, and when there are mistakes in those copies, we can go backwards from those mistakes and work out when they come in. Now, this is the part about being truthful. And say to people, look, there are 300,000 to 400,000 mistakes in the New Testament. And that might sound a lot, and it might not sound shocking, but actually takes people's arguments away, because 70% of those mistakes are grammatical or spelling, which we can trace back. Not one of them takes away from the authority of the New Testament. The more fragments that we have means we can go back further. This is called textual criticism, where you can look at documents and trace back, going to the earlier ones to see where the mistakes are crept in. And it kind of adds to the authority of that through the study of these documents. Now, if you look at Caesar's Gaelic Wars, it's going to be really hard to do that with 10 copies, working out where mistakes might have come in. You can definitely work out which is the oldest through carbon dating and things like that, and looking at the type of writing and using those other techniques. But when you've got a sheer amount of volume of the New Testament, it really adds to the argument that it is more reliable. And look at this, and this is the reliability of the New Testament. 99.5% accurate. Because of the sheer amount of fragments and copies that we have, scholars, both Christian and outside of the Christian faith, can attest that the manuscripts are 99.5% accurate that we have today compared to what the original would have said, which is amazing. Absolutely amazing. So the argument that the New Testament is not reliable goes out the window. It's 0.5% not reliable, and those aren't important. In that 0.5%, it doesn't change any of the doctrine or the major foundations of Christianity, because we have so many copies and we can put that reliability so high that this was the words that were written down by the original writers. And then we can move on to this. Because we've got so many manuscripts, and look at that, 9,300 manuscripts in other languages, included Syriac, Slavic, Ethiopic and Armenian. And this is the amazing thing. Even if the Greek versions were lost, the entire New Testament could still be assembled from all those other translations. That is when people say the New Testament is not reliable, it is absolutely one of the most reliable documents that we have from the ancient world today. So just those 3 slides show a lot of evidence positively for the reliability of the New Testament. And this is the one to really push back on. This is the one I find quite interesting with the reliability of the New Testament. There's a guy called Bart Ehrman. Now, Bart Ehrman has written a book called Misquoting Jesus. I won't link it below because it's tosh. And the funny thing why it isn't reliable in itself is the same year that he wrote this book, he wrote a book with Bruce Metzger. And Bruce Metzger was Bart Ehrman's mentor, I think, at Princeton University. And they wrote a book together about the reliability of the New Testament. And here's some quotes from that. So Melinda Penner of Standard Reason writes, Ehrman and Metzger state in that book, which they wrote together, that we can have a high degree of confidence that we can reconstruct the original text of the New Testament, the text that is in the Bibles we use, because of the abundance of textual evidence that we have to compare. The variations are largely minor and don't obscure our ability to construct an accurate text. The 4th edition of this work was published in 2005. The same year, Ehrman published Misquoting Jesus, which relies on the same body of information and offers no new or different evidence to state the opposite conclusion. So, picking up on what I was saying before on the other slides, there is an abundance of textual evidence, and the variations are only minor things. So, you get to the 4th edition of this book that Ehrman and Metzger wrote together, and he used to draw on his book for Misquoting Jesus, and he himself, Ehrman, comes up with an opposite conclusion about the evidence rather than about the evidence for the New Testament being unreliable. And what's funny, in his book he writes in the appendix of Misquoting Jesus on page 252, he writes, Bruce Metzger is one of the great scholars of modern times, and I dedicate the book to him because he was both my inspiration for going into textual criticism and the person who trained me in the field. I have nothing but respect and admiration for him, and even though we may disagree on important religious questions, he is a firmly committed Christian and I am not. We are in complete agreement on a number of very important historical and textual questions, which is in complete agreement, which means he sees the New Testament documents as being reliable. And he stated that in an academic work, not in a commercial work. And then he goes on to say this, if he and I were put in a room and asked to hammer out a consensus statement on what we think the original text of the New Testament probably looked like, there would be very few points of disagreement, maybe 1 or 2 dozen places out of many thousands. The position I argue in for misquoting Jesus does not actually stand at odds with Professor Metzger's position that the essential Christian beliefs are not affected by textual variants in the manuscript tradition of the New Testament. It's crazy, isn't it? Crazy that he says this. He absolutely agrees with Metzger. He agrees that the New Testament is reliable, but publishes a book stating that it isn't. So when people are saying to you about the reliability of the New Testament, you can go and quote Ehrman himself and say this guy who's not a Christian, who was a Christian, who studied under Metzger, who's a great academic, will testify, Ehrman and Metzger, that the New Testament is absolutely reliable from a textual criticism point of view. It's pretty damning for people to come back on you saying that. So there's three things. If people are saying to you the New Testament or the Bible is unreliable, you can take the New Testament, you can take the Gospels, take the Bible as a whole if you want, but use something like this as an example. One, ask them where they got that from. Two, show them the evidence of the for the New Testament and the Gospels, and also talk about those negatives, those 300,000 or 400,000 errors, and why we believe them. They're there and going back. And then even a guy who spends his whole career attacking the reliability of the New Testament, admitting that it is absolutely reliable. It's crazy. It's crazy because they're basing it on maybe emotion or something. Well, I think Ehrman's basing it on selling books and getting on TV. But push back and with these things. The Bible is reliable. The Bible is the Word of God. That's how we know about our Christian faith. That's what we stand on in our Christian faith. If we don't have the Bible, then we really don't have a faith, or the history of the faith, or what happened, or the history of Jesus being on this earth. It is foundational to us. When people come to us and say it is unreliable, we need to respond to that with love, absolutely, and help to educate people, because people are coming to us to attack our faith, not to become a Christian most of the time. So what do you think? Do you think that actually the Bible isn't reliable? How do you respond to all that evidence against it not being reliable? If you are a big fan of Ehrman, how do you reconcile that he can say in the same year, in two different books, what he has said? Put your comments below, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you soon. Bye.